My problem is not writing the code. My problem is getting the time to write the code. AI is not helping us cancel all the goddamn meetings we have every single day. When I do get time to code, I sit down and I got to learn a whole new tool set, and that's going to slow me down. And the tools that they output, they're making mistakes. I have to have the knowledge and bandwidth to be able to fix the mistakes of essentially a junior programmer who doesn't know what they're doing.
This is Test Case Scenario with me, your host, Jason Baum. This podcast is the definitive hub for knowledge and stories in the software testing and development communities. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button and let's dive straight into the episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I'm your host, Jason Baum, and with me, as always, my co-hosts, Evelyn Coleman, Marcus Merrel, and joining us today, Titus Fortner. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back, Titus.
Thank you.
Good to have you back on the show.
It's fun to be here.
Yeah. Marcus is in the office. Titus, it looks like you're somewhere with a chalkboard or a whiteboard. I don't think chalkboards. Oh, the office also. Wow,
it's the same building.
Same building. Look at that. They're not sitting together, though, I promise. And Evelyn, you're still in your gorgeous house with that beautiful grand piano.
You know me.
Yeah, I think I was on a call with someone sitting in the exact same position in your house. It's weird.
Many people have this exact same house with the exact same furniture.
Yes, it is beautiful, though. Well, thank you for joining us again. And we got a fun episode today. There's an article that came out recently called Developer Productivity in 2025, More AI, but Mixed Results. And who's the author of that one?
Jennifer Riggins.
It's real interesting. I suggest that you go read the article and then read the supplemental links. But to summarize, basically, what it said was that in 2024, Gen AI became prevalent in software development. And leadership was, I think all of us, were assuming that would lead to significant productivity enhancements, right? That's what we kept hearing. AI's here, and it's like a tool to assist. It's going to make everything better. It's going to make the mundane more optimized, and things are going to get faster. It's going to make all that just in general, your day more productive. And then recently, the 2024 DORA report came out, and in the report, it indicated that speed and stability have declined due to AI integration. So not only have we not been productive, it went backwards. We were actually less productive. So I'm just going to open up the floor to whoever wants to go first and just ask the question. Did you see this coming? Is this shocking to you? I would be surprised in 2024, maybe earlier in the year. But as time went on, I think I'm less surprised today. What about y'all?
I'm still overall surprised by it, that we're seeing negative productivity. Like some of the trends that they're talking about in there make complete sense to me. But like I use, AI for open source development and examples that I'm writing all the time. And it absolutely makes it faster for me to do specific things. But maybe my use case is also a little special because I know how to write in Java, but not in JavaScript. And it's Claude or ChatGPT makes it really easy to like, hey, this is the Java thing. What's the JavaScript thing? And then dive into that. But, if you're building a web app, maybe that's not what you need necessarily. Maybe that's not like I'm getting value out of it. That's not the standard use case.
Marcus, what do you think?
Mostly surprised at how quickly we're seeing this. I didn't really feel like we were going to be able to evaluate the impact this quickly. And I'm not really sure. I haven't clicked on the primary sources that Jennifer talks about. But I think overall, every paragraph I read that discusses another aspect of it is like, oh yeah, that tracks. Yeah, I could see why that would be the case. My sort of three takeaways, see if I can remember all three by the time I get through this, are one that it says that developers' biggest problem is with tech debt and documentation, and that these tools aren't helping them. That's two takeaways. The third one is the big thing that they say is, my problem is not writing the code. My problem is getting the time to write the code. AI is not helping us cancel all the goddamn meetings we have
every single day. I have 6-7 hours of meetings a day sometimes, and it's not helping me get rid of any of those problems. So I'm not surprised that it's when I do get time to code, I sit down and I got to learn a whole new tool set, and that's going to slow me down. And the tools as they output, they're making mistakes. I have to have the knowledge and bandwidth to be able to fix the mistakes of essentially a junior programmer who doesn't know what they're doing. Like, I'm not surprised by any of the findings. I'm surprised by how soon we're seeing it.
Well, I agree with Marcus that I'm surprised we were able to draw these conclusions so quickly and measure some of these things. I'm not surprised yet. I think sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. And given the economic climate, all the layoffs, and the immaturity of AI right now, a backslide isn't surprising. I think if we don't get traction, like if our wheels never grip the pavement and start to drive us forward in the productivity, that I will be surprised.
It just feels like the energy has been pointed at the wrong aspect of the problem. I mean, if I have a productivity tool and my biggest problem is documentation, what I don't want is a tool that sort of has documentation as kind of a side effect, as like a, here, you go through these hoops, commit this thing, do these copy paste. What I wanted to do is write documentation as I am writing the code without a single moment of intervention from me.
Documentation isn't a problem. Documentation is a solution to a problem, right? Like, no one's like, this website sucks because someone didn't write documentation.
I'm just saying what the article reported was that developers say that creating documentation is the biggest problem. And I know that ChatGPT is very good at that. So what is the disconnect between its ability to create documentation and developers saying it's not doing that? I think it's probably in the interstitial moments and actions that you have to take to create this documentation and tie it to the code you've just written.
Isn't that something that AI should do well?
So I think the general gist of some of these specific quotes that came out of like the DORA report and everything, we're focused on the wrong problems with AI. And this is like the talk I gave at Test Bash in Brighton, right? Like, what are we prioritizing when we say, this AI is going to help me write the code, write the tests, write these things. The bottleneck isn't writing things, it's maintaining them. If AI is not helping you maintain things and write things in an extensible way and help you understand that. And so I think we're seeing the same thing for development as I'm saying for test automation, right? Like I don't think that AI solutions for writing your tests for you is going to be long-term successful, at least where we're at right now. When you have AI write it, it's now harder for you to maintain it because you didn't write it. You don't understand what's going on. And is it possible in a few years we're going to have AI agents that are able to scan the whole code base and figure out what is the idiomatic way to add this feature so that it matches everything else and document it and make it? And probably. But man, every time someone's like, oh yeah, AI is going to replace a developer soon, I'm like, I use AI a lot, but I'm constantly asking questions like, no, I don't think that's right, or that's not working, or I'm pretty sure we need to do this instead of that. And having that conversation is extremely helpful, but it's still a conversation. It's not a, hey, do this, and it's going to be done for me.
You still might not get the right results.
Well, I think a lot of it is also like, I have had to maintain a lot of things. I know what good is. And so if what I'm getting back isn't good, I can have it help me massage it to where it's good. But you have to have that background of this is good and this isn't. And I think AI is trying right now to skip past that.
I'm picturing Marcus when we interviewed Jason Huggins on this podcast, and we were talking about AI, and he said to him, you're going to need to have a lot more knowledge. We're going to need workers who are much more advanced, because you're going to need to know when it's spouting bullshit, right? Like you need to know,
right. Yes.
This is right, this is wrong, and so it takes a higher caliber type person running the AI, and instead of, well, it's supposed to shorten the amount of time for more menial jobs. That's actually not true, right? It's like you need people who are much more advanced in their careers to be able to interact with AI, to know when this is right, this is wrong.
Right.
I think it depends, right, though, because we're talking about augmenting developers that have these really big skills in terms of productivity. And we've talked about this before on the podcast, there are productivity things that maybe aren't being measured, right? The productivity of someone who's trying to write code in a language that's not their native language, right? Like most things are in English, right? Not everybody who's coding is a native English speaker. AI is particularly good at that sort of thing. So there's probably a lot of things that are more productive, but they're not the big things that we measure because they're things for maybe folks those are the expectations, right? The expectation is that you got the job and you're supposed to be able to do it. And nobody cares if the email took you half an hour versus it took somebody who's a native English speaker 5 minutes. But now you can compete.
Totally. But like, I'm not native in writing Python. And I'm going to ask it to generate Python code for me. How the hell do I know it's correct?
I agree, but it's going to be less correct if you don't speak English in the first place.
Yeah, but it's going to actually take me more time because now I have to research what it wrote and did it get it right. And I think to me, that's like what's actually happening, right, with developers. Not that they don't necessarily know the code, but they have to test it a whole hell of a lot more.
It depends. Like one of the nice things about code is there's a right answer to a certain extent, right? Like does it solve the problem? As long as you're defining the right, it's deterministic. So it's not like, did it explain this properly? And so like if you have a couple tests, you can say, yes, this generated the right thing instead of the wrong thing.
But that makes it easier and harder because because you get complete correct code, which compiles. It's figuring out whether or not it's doing all the little things right. That requires the brain that Evelyn's talking about.
I don't disagree with anything y'all are saying in terms of productivity. I'm just saying there's probably things that AI has helped with in terms of productivity and gotten right that aren't being measured by DORA metrics that are saving some people's butts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Titus and I just this week have both used ChatGPT in each other's presence to be more productive at trying to do some experiments that we're trying to run. It's working beautifully. That's not ever going to go into a DORA report.
You know when it's really helpful? Outlining. That's a great use of AI.
Converting JavaScript to Java.
Summaries.
Well, it's
Great
interesting
use of
because
AI.
I've used several plugins for my IDE, trying out different things, and none of them let me like highlight code, right click, and say ask a question about this code. Like it's all explain this code or document this code or write unit tests for this code, and I'm like, that's not the bottleneck for what's holding us back from delivering more frequently.
So I think the magic from these tools, the productivity boost will come not from its ability to think and analyze an output, but to connect all these little tiny pieces like peripheral muscles to the exercise of manipulating code into our IDE. Like right now, it's just hard. You still have to do all this copy and paste and analyze. Like there's all this stuff you have to do, plus worrying about the content that it's actually producing. It's not really heading in that direction like it should be.
You shouldn't be using it to replace the things that you are already brilliant at. But if you have something that you're really weak in and you can use it to replace that, yeah, you might not be able to double check it and you might not be able to correct it if it's hallucinating, but you probably wouldn't have gotten it right either if you'd done it. And now at least you're doing something. Is that a problem? Like maybe it's introducing too many errors and too many bugs, but is it more than you would have introduced by doing something you do poorly? I mean,
that's what the DORA report basically said. That's what's happening, right?
They're concerned that it's stunting the growth of junior developers and limiting the further education of senior developers.
Yep. It's leading to security issues. Like it's faster code writing means, more bugs.
I guess I'm asking are the people that are using it, are they using it as an augmentation or are they using it to try to replace themselves? And I think there's a nuance there. I would love to be able to separate those two cases out and say, was one group more productive than the other group in terms of like how they use it?
Well, yeah, like if the executives are like, we're going to fire half your team and you're going to have to make up with it using AI, that you're not going to come out ahead on.
That's probably not going to work. Yeah.
Well, and especially I think we're also like, these are all brand new tools. We're still figuring out how to get the most value out of. So like there's process changes that have to go into this, right? Like you're not going to be like, here's an AI tool and now magically it's going to decrease or increase throughput and improve velocity. We're going to have to figure out the right ways to do things. And like a lot of companies still don't even have approval to use AI, right? Like there's a company policy saying you can't use AI on any of our products right now. And so I think there's social change that needs to happen. There's process that needs to be improved. I'm curious how some of these agents are going to improve things. We've got the basics now, but hey, let's add more things into the context window when we're asking questions or trying to do stuff. Like, can we make this idiomatic to the rest of the repo versus like, I think there's a lot of potential for where this can go. But I think the challenge is, are we going to lose our ability to understand things before we get to the point where the AI can do it all?
I guess I'd ask one question pursuant to that in order to try to formulate a hypothesis. Are we worse at writing and word processing because of things like Microsoft Word than we were? Or is it truly automating the stuff that's important to automate and leaving us to do the stuff that we want to do, which is right, and not worry about whiteout and editing and typewriter ribbons and stuff like that? Like, is that what we're talking about?
Can I give you a different example?
Sure. Yeah.
Because that's a good example. I was going to say Grammarly.
Yeah, that's
is
what
another
that's where
example.
I went to when.
Yeah.
I would disagree because my measure for whether or not we've improved using sort of helper tools is around whether or not we're still able to communicate, not necessarily the finer points of grammar, which people have opinions about. And obviously in an academic setting, people want you to speak a certain way and do things. But I wouldn't say that tools like Grammarly have cut down on our ability to communicate points to one another, especially now that we have video conferencing at the touch of a button, the same way that maybe I'm not as good at navigating, but I can still get to from point A to point B, maybe even more efficiently than I could 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it depends on how you're measuring. I can't read a map as well as I used to be able to, but I can get to the store much better.
What I kind of feel like we're missing here is along those lines. Like, to me, what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about typewriters and ribbons and corrective tape versus being able to share a Google Doc with you and the two of us work on this thing real time, it's like they didn't do anything about the content that I'm producing. They're not messing with that one bit. They're helping with all of the crappy, tedious, little tiny things that you have to do in order to collaborate with another author and making that stuff work great. And that is not the tactic that AI has taken so far. They're trying to replace my brain and the things that I output and the things that I'm good at, when they should be replacing typewriter ribbons and the equivalent.
I guess I kind of look at an AI as like, hey, I want a junior dev who just graduated from CS school and has got a lot of book knowledge, but doesn't necessarily know how it applies in the real world. And I'm asking this person, like, did I use this hash map correctly, right? Like, and that's the stuff that I'm getting from them. But you have to understand that's their role. You're not going to give that person, your web app to maintain. But it's interesting because I'm kind of looking at that as an opportunity for collaboration or opportunity to give feedback rather than creating. And, it's interesting. These articles are talking about like how this is, shifting things to the left and we're focused on the creation side and all of those things. And I'm just like, I think I've said for years now that I'm expecting AI to help more with monitoring than I am with testing.
You know what? That's so interesting, Titus, what you said about collaboration. I think that's the piece that's scary to me is like, are we becoming more isolated and we're missing the collaboration between human brains? Because instead of like in joke writing, you punch it up, right? You get a bunch of joke writers and you take a joke and it's like, okay. And then you punch it up, right? Same thing with code. Code is very collaborative, right? Are we asking the AI instead of each other for collaboration? And are we getting a worse product?
But we're already getting a worse product from the pandemic, right? Like the reports that show like remote work and what the social changes that have happened. Like I'm trying to remember that the takeaways I got, there was the junior devs are getting less help. The help they're getting tend to be from other like female coders are more likely to help junior devs than senior devs. Senior devs actually want to have like, just leave me alone and let me get my stuff done, right? And so like, I think we're already at the point where how's a junior dev supposed to learn if you've got either, a remote or a hybrid work environment, like that's better than just trying to figure it out yourself with Stack Overflow.
Let's, for a second, imagine a world where this article was the other way around. What if the DORA reports had come back and said, everybody is so much more productive because of AI? Is this a situation like, was it the dishwasher or the washing machine, where the introduction of the washing machine just meant that women would take on even more household tasks? Like, if the developers were more productive using AI tools, would we just be asking them to develop more?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
And yes, and speaking of comedy writing, yes, and these AI companies who have invested hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars would suddenly start to ask for their due, and they would stop subsidizing the tokens, and the cost of these things would go up 10x. Both of those things would happen.
So is it a bad thing then? Is this like, we're reading this report as like, wow, AI is really like, ruin things, or is on the track to ruin things, but maybe it's just given us some equilibrium.
I think it was expectations. We put the wrong expectations on it.
But do we want to fix that?
As a result, people are concentrating their work and investment on the wrong aspect of things they're trying to fix. I think this is going to improve. I have a feeling 2025 is going to be better than 2024. It's going to improve because people are going to start to figure out it's okay. So the thing that we originally thought it was going to be good at, it's not very good at that. Let's do something else with it. And that will probably, maybe the third or fourth iteration will actually work.
It's kind of like crypto, right? How the crypto movement. Sorry.
Oh, right. It's highly profitable. How it's highly profitable, and there's no more scams and everything. All the fraud's been straight.
Well, hold on. We're gonna throw money at it, and who cares which one's real, which one's snake oil, and then the real ones will rise to the top eventually, and the fake ones will disappear.
To a certain extent, how much of the decrease in productivity is because managers and executives have already started cutting? Like, we're not going to backfill because we expect AI to make the difference, right? That's going to have an impact on throughput. If you are getting more value individually from AI, the company, the product as a whole isn't. And so, that's the concern is, hey, we want, junior devs to be 10x devs now because they have AI, and that's the expectation.
Thinking as a senior leader, gosh, I don't know, the introduction of AI, doesn't that create a whole lot of risk in your field, where you're supposed to de-risk, right, as much as possible? Isn't this like a big risk factor?
Yeah, which is why I've been talking about it for 2 years as a bad thing.
I mean, if anything, like the rise of AI should make people much more testing focused, right? Like you need something that validates that what you did is what you intended to do, and what you did didn't break things in a way that you didn't intend. So some of this is just changing mindset, right? I've talked for years about how moving from a manual testing to automated testing, you can't just do the same manual tests with a computer. You have to completely rethink about what is a computer good at and how can I scale with the computer in a way that wouldn't make sense for a human, but does for automation, splitting them up and running in parallel and being able to scale things up instead of thinking about everything from the viewpoint of the user. And I think it's going to be the same thing with AI, as we need to think of, like, the industry is going to be thinking about, how do we change the process? How do we change our methods? How do we collaborate together with AI as part of the team instead of, so if we're just going to fire everyone and expect one person to do everything, we're not there yet.
Yeah. We're not.
So if you were going to keep everybody, right, you're going to keep your headcount the same, and it's 2025, 2026, AI has suddenly helped tremendously with productivity. We've passed this divot, and your workers have this additional time. What would you have them focus on to help with the risk?
Innovation, features to market, getting user value. I don't focus on things like profit and cutting jobs because I'm not Jack goddamn Welch.
Well, I'm saying, wouldn't you want them focusing on risk reduction instead of like you would keep the innovation linear, but then you'd spend that extra time doing some of this double checking and refinement that, you know, the AI is not super good at? Or would you just go straight for innovation?
Well, see, I mean, I'm not really the right person to ask this. So I'm not going to answer anyway. I don't think the innovation should be linear. Like, we're always asking Jason for more time and budget to do innovation. I think there's so much in this, it's just in our little space that we work in. There's so much innovation to be done to give users more value from the product that we make. I don't want to keep that linear. I want to keep giving people amazing stuff out of essentially what we've already got, which is kind of my whole mission here. And to me, if you're not increasing your risk mitigation with that, then you're just not even playing the game right.
If we think about just doing what we're doing now is with AI is going to be faster, we need to be thinking about what more we can do once we have AI. And I don't know, I've been throwing around like, are we even going to have UI at all in 10 years, right? Is AI going to figure out the back-end API calls and on the fly generate a custom front end for you populated with the back-end information, like, and filter out all the stuff I know I don't care about, right? Like, we could see some really dramatic changes based on having AI in a way that we couldn't if everything had to be done by a person. We have to completely change around how we're thinking about it and how we're leveraging it. So I'm expecting that people are going to, same thing, right? Like, let's offshore all our QA. It's like, oh, that didn't work. Let's bring them all back in the US. Like, you know, like, let's fire everyone for AI. And I'm like, oh, our competitors that didn't do that are doing better right now. Let's hire people back and try and get more released.
It bothers me so much because I know that the executives who make these bad decisions aren't going to be around for the accountability part. That's what bothers me the most. They're long gone and they don't have to pay the price, but I do. You know,
that was Emily Freeman's talk at All Things Open that you were referencing, Titus. It's a great talk if you haven't seen it. That was really at the very beginning when, I mean, AI was relatively new. When she gave this talk, you know, she was basically setting it up, comparing it to Warships, which is really, really great talk. I highly recommend you catch that. Wow, this was a really good talk. We should really revisit the topic. We should talk about AI more. Thanks everybody for being on. Titus, thanks for visiting us again. Hopefully you come on a few more times. You know, in 2025, let's make that the resolution. Thanks, Marcus. Thanks, Evelyn. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Test Case Scenario. We will see you next time. Thank you for joining us on Test Case Scenario. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'll make sure to respond to each and every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to keep in touch. If you missed our last episode, it's popping up on your screen right now. Go, click it. Until next time on Test Case Scenario.